Everybody, I'm James. I'm alcoholic. So my sobriety date is April 14th of 1997. I got sober when I was 15 years old. So yes, I was once young and sober. So that makes me 41 as of yesterday. So it's I don't know that I ever thought I would live this long nor stay sober this long, but yet here I am. So I have a home group. My home group is Our Daily Bread meeting, which used to be in person, and now we meet on Zoom. So we're stealing your guys' thunder. And we meet on Thursdays at 45 minutes after you guys start. So anyways, I do have a sponsor, and I sponsor people as well. And so I just want to start off by saying congratulations to all the people celebrating milestones, and welcome to anyone who's new or coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, this what I've found in Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of life that works, and I needed a way of life that works because I did not have one when I got here. So I don't think my story is much different than anybody else's. You know, I grew up in an alcoholic family. I wasn't aware that it was an alcoholic family. It was my family, which I assumed was normal. You know, but I was not really exposed growing up to normal drinking, or what I found out normal drinking was. From my observations, people either drank until they were drunk, or they didn't drink at all. I didn't know there was like a middle ground, but I found that out in Alcoholics Anonymous, that there actually is a middle ground, of which I don't know that I ever really participated, but those people exist. Most of them aren't in this meeting, I'm guessing. So like I said, grew up in an alcoholic family. Also my dad was in the military, so we would move like every 3 years to a new location. And so I got to go through the whole process, you know, of finding new friends, new people that I could, you know, that I could hang out with, or that I felt like I could mix with. And so I was, you know, constantly feeling kind of out of place. And I hear that from a lot of people in, you know, in recovery, that they felt like they didn't quite belong. So I would feel that every few years. And, you know, so in my growing up in my family, my dad was was the drinker, and my mom was what I guess I would refer to as an untreated Al-Anon. And so I was exposed to alcohol very young. I've got, you know, significant amount of German ancestry, and in Germany, they alcohol is like, well, especially beer, is not a big deal. So they didn't think anything of, you know, me having beer when I was a toddler or whatever. And so I had I may even have it here somewhere, a little kind of small beer stein mug that has a teddy bear on it of my name. And you know, so they would put some beer in it for me when I was a little kid, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And you know, I understood there was something special about alcohol, and I didn't put much thought into it beyond that, but I knew there was something about it, you know. And so whenever I had the opportunity to drink, I would. And which, you know, when you're a little kid, doesn't come very often. And my grandma tells me that I tried to manipulate her into buying me beer on a Sunday in the Bible Belt when I was visiting, which I'm sure didn't go over well with the other people in the store. But you know, getting what I wanted, especially when what I wanted was alcohol, you know, embarrassment or how other people felt about it was never a huge obstacle for me. So you know, like I said, I grew up in an alcoholic family, and I remember being in middle school, and my dad, like, I was so hyper concerned about what everybody thought about me, you know, whether I was going to be able to fit in, especially with moving all the time. And I had some friends over to the house, and my dad was drunk, and he like tripped over, you know, something, and like tried to blame it on the wind because we were outside. And I just had this feeling of just dread and embarrassment. And I remember making a promise to myself that I would never be like that. I would never be like my dad. I would never do that to my kids, you know, and really meaning it. And that was the first time that I really made a promise about alcohol, you know, or not using alcohol or not being drunk. And not the first promise, or not the last one, but it was the first one that I made, and I meant. And the problem for me is that I can make these promises and I can really mean them with all my heart, but I'm just not able to keep them, you know. And so the first time I got drunk, I was around 11 years old, and I was going back and forth between my grandpa and my dad, taking drinks from what they had, and I had that feeling that, you know, and if you're an alcoholic, you know that feeling where you're just like everything just is okay, you know. And all of a sudden I wasn't thinking at 100 miles an hour about what everybody else was thinking about me or anything like that. It was just everything was okay. And I remember stumbling back with my dad to the house and feeling this connection with him that I had never really felt. And I understood at least a little bit more, you know. I understood maybe why he drank, and you know, and I like that feeling, and I wanted more of that. So you know, my parents would leave money out sometimes, so I would take it. And this is at the time we're living in Germany, and they totally don't give a shit about the drinking age there, which was good for a aspiring alcoholic. So we would go to the next town over to this like big swimming pool complex, and I would take the money that I had taken from my parents, and you know, I'm still 11 years old, so I would get beer, but I would also get candy. And I would like hang out with my friends, and I would drink beer and eat candy, and it was like, it was good, you know. You know, alcohol helped me to fit in, helped me to be more social, helped me to have more fun, right? It was like it was a plus in my life, you know. And it was great. And it just kind of went along like that, you know, like where I'd have occasional drinking, but not, you know, not all the time or anything like that. And but we end up moving back right before I started high school. We ended up moving back to the US, to Tucson. And so I'm going through that process again of, you know, of trying to figure out, you know, where do I belong? Who am I going to hang out with? And at first it's, you know, decent, good people. And then people that are like me, you know, people that drink. And then I started, you know, trying out some outside issues as well, and stuff that I never thought I would do, but you know, if it changed the way that I felt, it was worthwhile. And again, things are still going good, you know. I'm still enjoying life. It's still adding to my life. And you know, and I started to have not big consequences because of my drinking, but you know, times where I would make a fool of myself or throw up and try to convince somebody else to clean up after me or stuff like that. And it was never alcohol that was the problem. It was always, you know, I shouldn't have drank that pool water with that alcohol that I was trying to extract from the pool water, you know. And I shouldn't, it was a bad idea. Or I shouldn't hang out with those people, or I shouldn't drink that brand of liquor, or I shouldn't mix it with those other substances, or whatever the case may be. But it was never alcohol that was the problem. Alcohol was the solution. The problem was always, you know, something connected to it that I had to fix. And alcohol starts becoming more and more important part of my life. And now I'm really starting to get rid of the people in my life that don't drink like I do, because, you know, people that don't drink like we do look at the way that we drink and they say, hey, you should not do that. You should slow down. You should, you know, maybe take a while away from drinking, take a break. And I didn't want to hear things like that. So the best way to not hear things like that is to not hang out with people that look at alcohol in that way. So my world's getting smaller, and drinking became about just having the will to continue rather than like making my life really fun. You know, it was just like, all right, if I drink, then I got a reason to live today, you know. And back then we had pagers. So for any of you that are really young, it's like a shitty one-way cell phone is the best way I can describe it. So if I got a page that, you know, from somebody I knew that would have alcohol or something else, I would just drop what I was doing. And sometimes I was school, so I would just leave school and I'd go meet up, and I'd do things like play with guns while I was drunk, and you know, cross the road without looking, and you know, because I just didn't value my life very much. And so I end up you know, when I first got sober, it was in what I like to refer to as like half treatment center, half cult. And a friend of mine was going to these meetings, and he said, hey, do you want to come along? So I went along. And what I found in that place was not necessarily the solution, but I found a definition for the problem. You know, the people there describe themselves as alcoholics and addicts. And when I listened to what they talked about, I said, that's me. You know, that's the way that I think, that's the way that I behave, that's the way that I interact with alcohol, right? And so I knew that I had found my people, and but I wasn't yet introduced into the program of recovery, right? Into working the 12 steps. So what my early recovery looked like was, you know, just white knuckling it and just like sitting on my hands, trying to find stuff to do, you know, and doing whatever I could do to stay sober. And I encourage you, if you're new, please find a sponsor. You know, somebody, the sponsor is just somebody who's been through the 12 steps before you, and ask them to show you how to do it. Because I didn't do that. And what happened was I was you know, a drunk without alcohol. So I'm still doing all the same shit. You know, I'm still like, you know, breaking shit, breaking the law, you know, causing trouble for other people. Except that now, because I don't drink, I think that I should get a pass for it. And you know, and when I finally did sit down and work the steps, probably half of my 8-step list were things that I had done in early sobriety, stuff that I couldn't even blame on alcohol. And so eventually I end up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you know, I was young, I was different, I was special. So I had to, you know, I'm looking for a sponsor. So I had to find the chair of the Young People's Committee, because that, you know, I was important, right? And he was a great sponsor, because he just sat down with me and he took me through the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's where the program is. And he took me through that book, you know, one paragraph at a time, and we'd stop and say, okay, that's what this means, you know, and he just helped break it down for me. And we went through all the stuff where it talks about, you know, about that first step, right? Where it talks about the obsession of the mind, right? And that it finally explained why I couldn't keep those promises. You know, when I would make those promises about, I'm only going to drink on the weekend, I'm only going to drink 3 days a week, you know, I'm never going to be like that. You know, when I made those promises, I meant them, but I just couldn't keep them, you know, and it explained that to me. And then it talked about the phenomenon of craving, right? Or the physical allergy. And what that looked like for me is that, like, as soon as I start drinking, I'm going to finish the job, right? And on the rare occasion that I couldn't, it was the worst feeling ever, you know. And that was explained, right? That was explained in that book when I went through that with my sponsor. And he didn't tell me you're an alcoholic or nobody gets here by mistake. He said, this is what an alcoholic is. Compare that to your experience. Is that you? And I found out it was me, you know, and I'm so grateful for having had that experience. And we just continued on working through the steps. And, you know, you know, I remember going through and just, especially when I sat down to do my 4-step inventory, and there's an example in the book about how to write it out. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I'd call him over and over, like, what do I do? What do I do? You know, but when I started getting that stuff down on paper, that's when I really started to get free, you know, because I had experienced, you know, just like when I was stuck in that loop of active alcoholism, I had experienced, you know, this loop of dry alcoholism. And when I got into the steps, that started to change, you know, and things started to get better. And I started to feel free, right? And the biggest thing for me was that I talked a little earlier about early sobriety was just sitting on my hands, white knuckling it, doing everything I could to not drink. And as I went through the steps, the alcohol problem was removed, right? It wasn't like I didn't think about alcohol any more than I thought about some food that I don't like, right? It wasn't a big deal to me. And that was true freedom for me, because when I got here, like really what I wanted was I wanted to not drink, and I wanted to not want to blow my brains out. That's really what I wanted when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I couldn't do those two things at once. I couldn't not drink and not want to blow my brains out. It was like drinking was a way that I was able to stay alive, but yet if I didn't have alcohol, what the hell am I going to do? And and going through those 12 steps with my sponsor, it kind of taught me about what do I do, right? Or how do I deal with life? How do I deal with disappointment? How do I deal with being happy? How do I deal with other people? How do I deal with responsibility? Like all this stuff, I learned all of that in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've had all sorts of like ups and downs in sobriety. When I was maybe 6 or 7 years sober, I spent like 2.5 months in a wheelchair after crashing a motorcycle, just being stupid. And but people in Alcoholics Anonymous really showed up for me. I had a friend who was like working full time, and I think going to school full time, and she would come and read the big book with me while I'd stuck in the hospital every day. And that's the kind of thing that we're taught to do for each other in Alcoholics Anonymous is to show up, right? And to and to be that helping hand, because I just didn't think that way before I got here, right? It was always like if I was doing something nice, there was a reason, right? It was because I wanted you in my favor, so so I could get something from you, right? And I was taught how to just do stuff because it's the right thing to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And and I've had all sorts of opportunities in sobriety that I never would have had if I was still drinking. I actually fucked up college while sober initially. And so I would get frustrated because in meetings people would say would talk about screwing up college when they were drunk. And I'm like, well, I did that sober. So I was afraid. I didn't even know if I'd be able to go back, right? But what I did was I just took what I learned in AA to school, right? And I was taught in AA, you show up on time, you listen. If you have questions, you ask. You try to be helpful, right? So I did the same thing at school, and it turns out that stuff works really well there too. And I end up getting, from when I went back to school to when I graduated, I had a 4.0 the whole time through. And and it was just by practicing what I had learned here, right? And then I started, getting these professional opportunities where people would put me, in charge of stuff that I just really felt like if they knew what went on in my head, and if they knew who I really was, they would never have made the decision to give me any position of responsibility. But you know what? People in AA did that for me when I was new. They gave me the opportunity to be of service. I remember being on the ASCIPA, the Arizona Young People's State Conference. On that committee, they made me the registration chair, and I was nuts, but they gave me the responsibility, and it gave me something to do, so I wasn't thinking about myself, and I was able to translate that experience into how to behave in the outside world, right? How do I, when I'm handed a responsibility, what do I do with that? And I ended up having a job where I got to travel around all the time and teach other people how to do stuff. And the company I worked for would send me as their representative to these big companies. It was crazy, and today I get to, work on stuff that would have been a dream for me as a little kid, and that's all because I just kept showing up, right? I kept showing up, and I kept doing the work, and I asked for help, and I try to be helpful, right? And it, like I said, when I got here, it wasn't about oh, I hope that I can, do well in college and be successful and have good opportunities, and none of that was what I was thinking about when I got here. All I wanted was to not drink to not want to blow my brains out. That's all I wanted when I got here, you know, but the solution to that was the solution to everything else, right? The solution to not wanting to drink, right? And not wanting to blow my brains out. That was that same solution to like, how do I live life and how do I do something with myself, you know? And I just, I followed that and it works, you know, and I encourage anybody who's new or who's coming back, like, please, number one, please keep coming back. And number two, find somebody who's been through this process, who's done it before, and just ask them to show you how, you know, and the opportunities are endless, you know, and I think I've talked enough, but again, thank you for asking me to come speak. And it's always good to be at a meeting about Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.